Yeah, there are of course a lot of measures in general, because climate change affects so many sectors and aspects and people in a city. But a very popular measure at the moment is using nature-based solutions and green measures. We see that across many cities in Europe, and that's probably because using nature-based solutions can tackle a number of urban issues and urban problems. So it can reduce heat, it can reduce pollution. When you open up spaces and de-seal ground and have more grass fields or parks, then you also increase infiltration of water in the ground, so you reduce the flooding after heavy rain events. So, and because of these multiple benefits, nature-based solutions are at the moment very en vogue, you would say. And I think they are a good measure if they are done right. You can also do something not so good when you use non-native species or very water-consuming species, but when done right, then this is really a good measure to progress. Yeah. My research focuses on Europe over the last couple of years. And in Europe we have a couple of forerunners. Yeah? You have to say that mostly the very large cities, they have the capacity to do something. So London is a very forward looking and a very progressive city in that respect. Also Rotterdam, and now also Berlin is coming. Barcelona is also one of the cities that is really well prepared or taking climate change into account in city planning and local policy. So it's also a very advanced city in that respect. Yeah. The Paris Agreement actually tries to lower global warming below 2 degrees, yeah? So not even reaching 2. So there is, you know, this question of 1.5 versus 2 degrees, yeah? I need to be hopeful, that's why I say yes, I think it's still realistic. I'm very much welcoming the new awareness and sense of urgency that we also see in the population, particularly in the younger population. The recent report on global warming of 1.5 degrees of the IPCC in last year also showed that it is possible to reach 1.5 degrees, but that we really need to act now. And that we can't even wait a couple of years more, because it gets increasingly more difficult to implement anything, to implement measures later. I am investigating European cities over the last 8 or so years. And we really see that a lot more cities getting engaged. So there is a progression. Cities are planning both mitigation and also adaptation measures. So that makes me hopeful. Yeah? Other issues that we have are now on implementation. So that from having the awareness that we need to do something, that we get to the stage of implementation and really try things out on the ground, and then that we can then say, oh, that works well, that doesn't work so well. So we really need to implement solutions now. Yeah. The general conclusion across the whole of the EU, meaning all 28 member states, is that approximately 2/3 of the cities have mitigation plans, 1/3 of the cities have adaptation plans, and another third has no plan yet. There is a small north-south gradient. It's not as strong as still 8 years ago. Spain and Italy are actually developing and advancing. They are also developing local climate change plans now. But there is still a little bit of a gradient with more local climate plans in the north and a little less in the south. The north, in particular England, Denmark, Finland, they have a long history in environmental planning because they are closer or they have more land at the sea. Also the Netherlands is one of those examples. So when they had traditionally already impacts felt by different natural phenomena, it seems that these countries and cities started to prepare for climate change earlier. And then your second question was between large and small cities, and there, yes, we see a difference, in particular in countries where it's totally free to develop local climate plans or not. So where the municipalities can decide to develop one or not. There are also 4 to 5 countries, depending on how you define it, in Europe that demand, where the national government demands local communities, cities and smaller local municipalities to develop local climate plans. This is definitely the UK, that's France, that's Denmark for adaptation, and that is Slovakia for mitigation, I believe. Yes. And in those countries, the difference between larger cities and smaller cities is not that pronounced, because the national government demands also smaller cities to develop climate plans. And in France, for instance, the cut-off size is at 20,000 inhabitants. And you see that cities below, or municipalities, these are all only small towns, that below that really no one has local climate plans anymore, and above they have it. The same was when the cut-off date was 50,000, which was it a couple of years back. They realized that cities below 50,000 didn't engage, so then they lowered this threshold. And a second thing is that when you look at cities in countries where local climate plans are mandatory, then there is also a quality issue involved. So cities develop these plans, but sometimes there are still capacities and capabilities lacking. So then these plans are sometimes very broad, very general, and you see that the staff in the municipality just doesn't have the knowledge, the capability, or maybe also the financial resources to get consultants in. So in particular, capabilities, capacities really make a difference between larger and smaller cities. Wow. So first of all, in terms of adaptation, I think this greening strategy of Barcelona is really a good track. You have this policy of how many trees, planting how many trees, 1,000 trees, there were a lot. So this is being initiated, this is going on, and there is research attached how much actually streets with certain trees and plant species, how much they reduce temperature or not. Yeah? So this is definitely a very well and a good progress. In terms of mitigation, I have to say I don't know that much about Barcelona. Usually for mitigation, mitigation targets certain sectors, yeah, and adaptation is a more broader cross-sectoral issue, but mitigation is a sector issue. So often it targets the energy supply, yeah. What sometimes is lacking to also look at energy consumption, so to introduce incentives for people not to consume so much. Another aspect, but I really have to say I don't know whether Barcelona is really looking at that, but with my professional background, I think that a lot of Mediterranean cities have the potential to use traditional building styles, yeah, instead of having air conditioning everywhere, because in previous centuries and still in the Near East and cities of the Near East or Northern Africa and so above the Sahara, this still works quite well, yeah. So you have relatively easy measures just by your building design to increase ventilation and then cooling, yeah. So I would urge every Mediterranean city to really look into that, whether there can be kind of a progress backwards, you know, instead of implementing adaptation, air conditioning in every building.